Welcome to another edition of Seahawks Forever. I'm Dan, and as we continue to look forward to the NFL Draft, now just 17 days away, this one is sure to get some of you riled up. I am going to explore the possibility of the Seahawks selecting Jalen Milroe in this year's draft. That may catch you by surprise. If you saw some of my coverage from the Senior Bowl, wasn't very high on him, as many people were down on him that week. He had a bad week in Mobile. But things have changed in a couple of different ways that have caused me to reevaluate why it might make sense for Milro to be a Seahawk. Brace yourselves. I'm going to give you all the reasons I think it does make sense coming up next on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Thank you, as always, to the fine folks at Doer for sponsoring the program. Doer is built for doing, spelled D-U-E-R, and it is by far the finest apparel manufacturer I have ever experienced in my life. Lifestyle apparel for every occasion. These stretch jeans right here are unbelievable. 20% stretch. They're incredibly comfortable, but they're also built tough. They're built for doing anything that you want to wear jeans to do, whether it's lounging around the house, a night out on the town, working on your car on the driveway, doing some work in the yard, going to a ball game. They're going to work. And they make so many other things as well, too. Flagship stores in Denver and Los Angeles, but you don't have to leave your home to get 20% off your first order for being a viewer of this program. Go to shopdoer.com/forever for 20% off your first order. That's shopdoer.com/forever for 20% off your first order. Welcome to the program. If it's your first time here, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell button if you want notification of future episodes. All the other ways that you can support the channel. And by the way, as a way of reminder, subscribing to it and just sharing the episode is the best way to support the channel. But all the more tangible ways are listed down below and linked in the description. All right, you guys, let's get into this. And this is going to be one that, as I mentioned at the top, might take some of you off, might scare some of you. But what I'm going to do is try to make my case here with 3 reasons that I think it makes sense why Jalen Milroe might be a match. Actually, 4 reasons, now that I think about it, for the Seahawks. And then 1 reason why it simply might not make sense. So let's start with reason number 1. Jalen Milroe is the most physically gifted quarterback in this class, without a doubt. He is the best athlete, a 99 on the athleticism score coming out of the combine. Almost as good a tester as Anthony Richardson. It's just that Richardson was 6'4" and 245 pounds. He has the best combination of athleticism, mobility, speed, strength, arm strength. He is an elite deep ball thrower, maybe the best deep ball thrower in the class. Where the struggles have come and what turns so many of you off to him as a prospect is some of the issues with the intermediate game. He's raw. And there's some mechanical issues that I believe can be fixed in the short throwing, kind of that 20 up to 20 yards is where I really saw him struggle in Mobile. And if you remember watching my content then, I was out on him. Like, he just looked so bad throwing the ball in the intermediate range at the Senior Bowl that I just couldn't get behind him. And then you get sucked in a little bit to some of the negative narrative too, and there was a lot of that chatter down there. But what I think was happening is I think he had begun the process of working on some of his mechanics to get ready for the draft. And when you first start, it's like learning a new golf swing or going and getting golf lessons after swinging the same way for years. At first, it gets worse before it gets better. Because at the combine, he looked dramatically improved to me. At his pro day, he looked much improved. Daniel Jeremiah called it going to the laboratory. You could tell he'd been doing some work. His lower half wasn't married to his upper half. He doesn't stride into the ball. He throws more flat-footed on shorter passes, whereas when he unleashes it deep, he gives you the really good mechanics and strides into it. Forget about the small hand size. They measured bigger later. Like I can tell you, I've stood feet away from him watching him throw the football in Mobile. The small hands don't impact his ability to spin the ball. He has as much arm strength as maybe anyone in the draft. Quick release, like all the pieces are there. It just needs to be refined. So that's one reason. He's simply the most physically gifted quarterback in this class. Now, is he a finished product? No. Does he need work? Yes. But guess what? You know who else does? Every single quarterback who's ever drafted. Name me a quarterback who came out ready-made to play in the NFL as a rookie without any development necessary. Just hit the ground running, ready to go. The last guy I can remember that was even close was Andrew Luck. You look at some of the other players that sort of fit his skill set and how much of a learning curve they had to endure early in their career, and how coming out of college, they didn't look anywhere near a sure thing. Let's talk about a couple of guys here. The most recent was Anthony Richardson. Now, he's not the best example here, but he was the most recent. And then I'll get to the other two that I think are a better example of what I'm talking about. Richardson only really had one season as a full-time starter at Florida, 55% completions, 14 interceptions over his last two seasons. And you could really see the struggles. Like, there were some wow throws on tape. So you saw that he was capable of making those. And certainly at the combine, throwing against air, he looked otherworldly. But then you saw just the real struggles completing passes. 55%, that's just not good enough. Typically, and you hear this a lot from scouts and analysts, that accuracy is something that's harder to teach from an innate standpoint. That if you're a 55% thrower in college, chances of you being a 70% thrower in the pros, probably not great. And certainly Richardson has struggled so much the last couple of years that the Colts went out and invested $15 million in Daniel Jones to compete with him this year. You know, Richardson might be on the outs if he doesn't win the job this year and take a step forward. But there's two others that I think are a more fair comparison. Josh Allen at Wyoming, 2.5-year starter there, 56% completions. That's bad, you guys. 56% completions and 21 interceptions his last two seasons, including 15 in one season alone. Playing against a lower level of defensive competition. Now you can argue that, you know, he's not throwing to NFL receivers either. And that excuse was made for Anthony Richardson too. I think that Florida team, if they weren't number one in the country, they were top 5 off the top of my head in drops by their wide receiver group. Not a very good group down there. I think that was used as an excuse in his favor. But we've seen the struggles. And he's not just a little bit off. This isn't a case of Anthony Richardson throwing like slightly behind guys instead of leading them. He's like airmailing balls over guys' heads, hitting them in the ankles, things like that. Similar to what we saw from Milro in the practices in the Senior Bowl. Josh Allen has turned out okay, hasn't he? Right? But coming out of college, I mean, I bet if I did a quick Google search, I could find a lot of reactions from Buffalo Bills fans when they selected Josh Allen. In fact, I think now I recall seeing video of some of the Bills fans that were at the draft the year he was drafted, and they were livid. A kid from Wyoming who hasn't played at a big level, that only completed 56% of his completions, but they drafted him based on upside alone. How insane. Some Bills fans were livid at that one, right? And then Lamar Jackson. Again, coming out of Louisville, he was a bad passer. I mean, he got by on his legs. He ran for almost 5,000 yards with the Cardinals. 57% completions with 19 picks his last two seasons. Lamar Jackson went in the first round. It's the last time a team has traded up into the first round in order to take a quarterback and get that fifth-year option. He goes with the 32nd pick. And it's not viewed as big of a risk there at the 32nd pick, but there were people that didn't think he was going to ever become an NFL passer. I certainly was really hard on Lamar Jackson his first few years in the league. I just didn't think if you ever took his legs away from him or as he aged, I thought if he doesn't develop as a passer, he's not an NFL quarterback. But guess what? He developed. In those first couple of years, he had Greg Roman, who, was really great at that same kind of RPO-based offense that Colin Kaepernick was successful with under Roman with the 49ers. And it worked. And it gave him time. It bought him time. He had to play earlier in his career than I think he should have. Did he play as a rookie? I think he backed up Flacco his rookie year, right? But he was so dynamic with his legs that it bought him time. And also that offense that Roman devised around him gave him an opportunity to throw to guys who were wide open. Even today, as much as Lamar Jackson has really developed as a passer, obviously he's an MVP. Hasn't delivered on the promise yet that he made on draft night when he was taken that he would lead the Ravens to a Super Bowl victory. Hasn't done that yet, but you can certainly see it in his future. But he was able to get by those first few years because of his legs and because of how it created opportunities for him to throw to guys that were wide open, that the development as a passer caught up. And, now he's just as dangerous with his arm as he is with his legs. However, you don't see him he's not a surgeon. You don't see him making a ton of tight window, laser-like dime throws. That's not his game. But because of the threat of the run, he's able to scan the field and he's able to find guys wide open. But he's come so far as a passer. But there were people who felt very, very similarly about Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson as prospects coming out. There's a lot of development there. They better not play early in their career. So that's the other part of it. My next reason that I think it makes sense, and I said this on the live show last night where I recapped all of my positional favorite rankings. He fits the timeline now. If Geno Smith was back, I wouldn't be as interested in the idea of Jalen Milroe because he might have to play too soon. Granted, for 2025, you have Sam Howell under contract. But I think 2026 would even be too soon for Milroe to play if you're counting on him starting. And if Geno was here getting into his mid-30s, 35, 36, 37, the chance of injury is always there, or the idea that you might just want to, move on for cap purposes and move to Milroe too soon before he's ready, he fits the timeline now. Seahawks are committed to Sam Darnold for 2 years. They can't really get out of that contract until the third year without taking a major cap loss. They're committed to it. And I do believe that they pivoted to Sam Darnold, and now there's some indication, right, with some of the information that's come out after Geno Smith signed his extension with the Raiders, that the Seahawks may have just preferred Darnold. And the first opportunity they had when they saw that negotiations weren't going to go right from the beginning, maybe they even lowballed him, we may never know, that they liked Darnold. They knew about him, the relationship with Kubiak and how he fits the system. And they may have just, there's more indications today than there were maybe a week ago that they may have just wanted to make that switch and they made it happen. They're committed to Sam Darnold, and their first choice is he's going to be QB1 moving forward. But because of that, and especially because you have Sam Howell under contract as well, Jalen Milroe wouldn't be in jeopardy of having to touch the field at all as a rookie, and probably not for the first few years. It gives you an opportunity to try to tap in to that upside. Leads me to my next point. Quarterbacks are all a risk. It's a lottery ticket. No matter where you draft them. God, somebody posted the draft. Oh, I can't remember the year, but the year that Blaine Gabbert and Jake Locker and Sam Ponder all were in the top 12. How'd that work out? Or 2022 when it was Kenny Pickett and then, nobody else until the 5th round. And the only guy from that draft that's still on the team that drafted him is Brock Purdy, who was the last player taken in the draft, right? The other reason that it would make sense is in the meantime, while you're developing him, you can use him. Imagine the packages you could use with this guy on third down, red zone, wildcat quarterback stuff. Have him on the field as the same time as Sam Darnold, as a running back or a slot receiver, somebody that you could move him into the backfield and do some things with, or just pitch it to him in short yardage. Or it would put a lot of stress on the defense, create a lot of intrigue, certainly, give him a chance to get on the field. We heard Clint Kubiak raving about Taysom Hill and cited him as exhibit A of why the Saints were pretty good on third down last year, because he said when you have a guy like Taysom Hill, it really gives you advantages. You could use Jalen Milroe in a very similar role. So there'd be value there. The other part of it is you've got extra draft picks. You traded DK Metcalf, you traded Geno Smith, you have 5 picks in the top 92. You have a roster that's pretty evenly layered with young players on rookie contracts with upside. It gives you the opportunity, the luxury of taking a shot. And regardless of what you think about any of the quarterbacks in this class, anytime you spend a draft pick on a quarterback, you're taking a shot. There was no guarantee Russell Wilson was going to work out and become a starter as a third-round pick. It worked. Alex Magoo didn't. Granted, 6th round. I get it. We don't have a lot of sample size with John Schneider of other examples of him taking shots on quarterbacks. But we do know that there are 2 other quarterbacks that he fell in love with and was exploring opportunities to get them even when Russell Wilson was in the prime of his career. One of those was Josh Allen, and one was Patrick Mahomes. In fact, there's significant, legitimate reporting, we've all heard this, that they even reached out to the Cleveland Browns the year they had the first pick and they took Baker Mayfield. That was the same year, right? I'm not getting these years mixed up. Where they inquired as to whether they might want to trade for Russell Wilson because John Schneider wanted to get himself Josh Allen. And you remember he went to the pro day in Laramie, Wyoming to watch him throw, and that pissed off Mark Rogers, Russell Wilson's agent, so much that he called Schneider, and they had, a profanity-laden phone call. He got in trouble just for going to watch Josh Allen when it seemed like we weren't going to be in a position to take him. So that's another thing to tuck away, because I think based on that information, right, we've seen John Schneider draft 2 quarterbacks and seriously consider drafting 2 others. And 3 of those 4 were home runs. And Alex Magoo was a 7th round pick, right? Now, I told you I'd give you a reason why it might not make sense. And the whole reason I'm doing this episode today, the reason this is relevant, otherwise I would have let it stand on my list and the reasons I gave for having him on my top 5. Because if you want Jalen Milroe now, you may have to take him in the 1st round. If that sounds crazy, because you happen to think he's a 3rd or 4th round talent. I've had a lot of people tell me that. I don't want to touch him until day 3. Well, the NFL invited him to the draft. That came out today, or yesterday, as I record this. The NFL doesn't invite a lot of guys to the draft anymore. They used to. They used to put out 30, 40 invites. And then they had a couple of high-profile cases of players falling and being drafted much lower than they were expected, and some falling all the way out of the 1st round. The most recent example I can think of is Will Levis. Some people thought he was going to go in the top 5. Some people thought he was going to be in play for Seattle at 5. I remember that year there was a lot of speculation that he was going to be a guy that Schneider might take. He obviously didn't. He fell out of the draft, or out of the 1st round. It's embarrassing. It's a bad look for the league. They don't hand out that many invites anymore, and they only invite players that they have substantial intel from teams that leads them to believe he's got a shot to be a 1st round pick. It sounds like this year they might only be inviting 10 to 15 players. And they've invited Jalen Milroe. That means someone's thinking about taking him in the first round. Now, there's two different ways this could go. Pittsburgh takes him, right? Or one of the teams at the top of the draft that needs a young quarterback passes on him and then trades back up into the first round to take him. Cleveland could do that. If Pittsburgh takes him, I'd be concerned because Mason Rudolph is the only other guy there. And while they say they have confidence in him starting, and he's a starting caliber quarterback in this league, not a top 20 starting caliber quarterback, but he can get you by. But the Steelers aren't looking to get by. They're built in every other way to win. I fear that if Milroe goes there, he'd have to play as a rookie. And I don't think that's a good idea. Now, Arthur Smith is kind of Greg Roman-like in some ways, and may be a guy that can devise an offense that suits Milroe while he's developing, similar to what Lamar Jackson had with Greg Roman. But it's risky. I think if he went to a team like Seattle, where he didn't have to play right away, or a team with an older quarterback, where, again, maybe 3 years down the line, if it clicks, he would play. That makes sense. But if you're Seattle and you love him, and he's top of your board when you're sitting there at 18, and you know the Steelers are lurking there at 21, that may be where you have to take him if you want him. Now, I would not like that. Other than, well, they must really believe in him, and that could be really fun someday. It's not my preference. So if you're mad at me, if you're watching this and you're ticked, just take a breath. It's not my preference. I'm just telling you. Drafts are about acquiring talent that you believe can be great. It's not always about just plugging a hole. So many of you right now just want to plug. I just want that left guard. We got to have that left guard. I can't sleep at night without the left guard. You take the players that you think have the best chance to be all pros, Hall of Famers, at least at the top of the draft. You get to day 3 and you're basically throwing darts at the board, right? It's a lottery. But early in the draft, you're taking upside. And at the quarterback position is so unique that you throw all the rules out the window. Who cares if he's not ready to play as a rookie? We don't want him to, because he won't be ready, and that would also mean that things went really, really badly with the other two Sams. Here's one more little bonus reason that I think Jalen Milroe is very likely to be highly graded by the Seahawks. What do the Seahawks value? Character. 2-time captain in Alabama. Incredibly smart and articulate. Great locker room guy. Carries himself the right way. Works hard. All ball. Smart. Tough. Dependable. He's got all those Seahawk qualities, man. The day one in Mobile on Monday, when they had Dylan Gabriel come out, they had Jalen Milroe come out, and then Jim Nagy, who was the executive director at the time, he spoke as well. And little pat on the back. I asked the first question of all three of them. But Jay, I immediately knew, because I'd never heard him speak before. As soon as Milroe started answering my question, I was like, oh boy. I really hope I like how this guy looks this week, because he sounds like a Seahawk. He walks like a Seahawk, talks like a Seahawk. And you look inside the numbers. Again, I gave you those numbers. We'll wrap it up with this. I gave you those numbers for Anthony Richardson, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson, right? Remember that? Here's how I'm going to tie a bow on this. Lamar Jackson, 57% completion percentage, 19 interceptions his last 2 seasons. Josh Allen, 56% completion percentage, 21 interceptions his last 2 seasons. Anthony Richardson, 55% completions, 14 picks his last 2 seasons, and he didn't even start full-time until his last year. Jalen Milroe completed 65% of his passes the last 2 years at Alabama. 17 interceptions is his last 2 seasons as well, so that's right up there with those guys. But 65% completions. 2 years ago, under Tommy Rees as his offensive coordinator, 23 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Now last year, 16 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. It's not great. Felt like regression. And 5 of those touchdowns versus 10 interceptions happened in SEC play. It's a red flag. It's a concern. Was he not, even though he had 3 different offensive coordinators his first 3 years at Alabama, and then 4 to make it a clean sweep when Kalen DeBoer came in, he had to learn new systems every year. Maybe he was more comfortable under the offense that Nick Saban ran with Tommy Rees as his play caller, as opposed to Kalen DeBoer without Ryan Grubb there. Maybe Grubb would have been a little better for him. And then on the ground, 1,500 yards rushing and 33 touchdowns to go along with all that. So 10 percentage points higher completions than those other 3 quarterbacks. And yet here we are slamming him for not being able to throw intermediate. PFF grades, take him for what you will. An overall passing grade of 78.3. That's in the green. That's very good. His intermediate grade's 90.7. It doesn't always look efficient. It doesn't always look perfect. His deep grade, 93.1. His grade against pressure, 51.6. That needs some work. But what I do like on tape is he's not afraid of pressure. He just needs to learn how to handle it better. Learn how to, where to go with it, how to take the check down, and how to get to his second and third read. Like every quarterback who comes out in the draft. And oh, by the way, he's just 22 years old. That's my case. I'm not saying I want it at 18. I wouldn't like it because the thing that stinks about taking a quarterback early when you already have one, and Green Bay fans had to live with this three times. Aaron Rodgers and then Jordan Love, is you don't get the payoff right away, right? We want that first round pick to be a guy that comes in as a rookie and makes an impact. You wouldn't get that. It would almost be like you're punting on the first round, you stash him away, and you hope that you get something out of it. If that happens, let me leave you with this. I'm telling you, take a deep breath, understand that the strength of this draft class is days 2 and 3, and the Seahawks have 4 picks between 50 and 92. That's what's going to determine how good this draft is. It's how well they nailed day 2. Kind of gives you the luxury, if you love him, if you have conviction that Jalen Milroe can develop into a franchise quarterback, to just take him with that first pick and redshirt him. Stash him away. Use him in packages, sure, or not. And then go nail day 2 and move forward. You take a shot. If it doesn't work, you could still, A, have a great draft, and B, just look at teams like the Rams. How many years did they go without a first-round pick, and they ended up winning a Super Bowl? It's how you manage the rest of the roster. Every quarterback pick is a risk. It's the last time I'm going to say that today. Anyway, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. Did I change your mind at all? Are you a little bit more open-minded to it at all? Right? You want upside. You want great players, and sometimes taking a shot on a great player involves risk. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Seahawks Forever. Subscribe to the channel. All the other ways you can support me and the show are listed down below in the description, including my Cash App link. Dave, one of my great longtime, most generous viewers and supporters, mentioned to me recently that even though he donates in other ways, he knows that I lose a percentage of it. Cash App would be 100%, so I threw it on there. Anyway, the best way you can support the show is just watch, subscribe, engage in the comments, share the episode. That's what's helped the channel grow to the point that it is today. I'll be back with you tomorrow. Forever and always, go Hawks.